Welcome to the School of Athens by Estelle and Leah.
Making philosophy more accessible to younger people.
Hi guys, welcome back.
Hi. So, I'm Estelle.
I'm Leah.
After 2 weeks of absence,
we hope you had a Merry Christmas, ho, 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 and a Happy New Year.
Leah, you've had your 18th birthday as well, actually, right?
Oh yeah, and you too. I mean, we turned 18 over the holidays, so we're adults now. So this is not a podcast by young people for young people anymore. Yeah, first of all, we wanted to give you some philosophy introduction recommendations because this is a podcast that's supposed to, draw you into philosophy and all. We thought it might be good to give you some recommendations. So this one is a book that we both really liked. It's called Think by Simon Blackburn.
It's a really nice book if you don't know that much about philosophy in depth yet. But it's a nice introduction to all the different key topics in philosophy, including determinism, nature of God,
ethics.
Yeah, exactly.
And then if you already know about your interests a little bit more, if you're very interested in, I don't know, logic or philosophy of science or something, I really like the series of Oxford very short introductions, and they have many many little books about also philosophical problems or topics or thinkers. Yeah, I really like those. If you really want to get into it, there's also this podcast by BBC called In Our Time Philosophy. I love that podcast because the topics are very interesting, and they talk about philosophy a little bit more in depth, so it may be a little bit more advanced, but I really like it. And if you're interested, you should give it a listen.
Yeah, and another maybe more accessible podcast is called Philosophy Bites. You can find it on Spotify and I think all the main podcast apps. And it's very short 10 minute, 20 minute episodes on small topics, and it's very, very accessible, very easy to understand. There's also a website, Philosophy Now, that has really good articles on philosophy.
Links are given in description.
So our podcast, obviously, it's called School of Athens, and maybe if you've seen from our cover, it's the two key figures from the School of Athens, and the School of Athens is a famous painting by Raphael, and it's painted between 1509 and 1511. And I've actually gone to see this painting. It's very cool. And it's smaller than you think it is. The two main figures are in the middle, and you can see Plato pointing to the sky as an idealist. And we'll talk more about that in a moment. And we have Aristotle not pointing, but his hand is sort of towards the ground. And he's an empiricist, sort of reflects their views as well.
Yeah, but if you don't understand yet, that's fine, because we'll talk about it later. The School of Athens is, as Estelle said, this very famous painting by Raphael. It basically captures one of the main themes of Renaissance, so the rebirth of ancient Greek philosophy. We wanted to kind of link that to our mission or our aim, because we want to, bring back philosophy to youth, right? Or have this kind of spirit of rebirth or admiration of the work of early philosophers. And that's why we also thought it might be good to talk about it in the second episode.
Yeah, we'll be talking about Socrates, Plato and Aristotle, and this sort of goes in a chronological order almost, because Socrates was Plato's teacher and Plato was Aristotle's teacher, and Plato's formed his famous academy.
The academy was founded by Plato in 387 BC in Athens. Aristotle studied there for 20 years before founding his own school, the Lyceum.
So for Socrates, he lived from 470 BCE to 399 BCE, and what's very special about him is that he actually never wrote anything down. All this knowledge we have about him comes from his disciples and mostly Plato. So we can't say for sure what his opinions were, but he is, a very important philosopher. Philosophy is also like divided in pre-Socratic philosophy and post-Socratic philosophies. And why he's so important is because he really acknowledged the importance of knowledge. So he said, for example, that you can only live fulfilled life if you look for knowledge or if you keep asking and finding out new things. So yeah, that's kind of the spirit of philosophy.
Yeah. And one of the articles from the website I mentioned before is called Socrates Revisited, the Jurors Speak. One of the key facts about Socrates, I guess, is that he was executed by Athens for his almost what's the word?
I don't know, hybris?
Controversial, I was thinking.
Okay.
Controversial ideas on politics. And this article sort of shows what the people who condemned him thought of him. And they sort of accused of Socrates of thinking that he's above the gods and that he's arrogant, hubristic. Obviously, Socrates, like a counter that was said by Mr. White, I think, an article was that Socrates knows that he knows nothing. And that, in fact, he wasn't arrogant at all. He was humble in his lack of knowledge. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, he knows that he knows nothing. I mean, that means that he kind of acknowledged that, human conception is so incomplete, or that we can never really know everything or know something for sure. So yeah, that's kind of the spirit of his thinking. But also, I mean, at the same time, he thought it was important that we keep questioning to find out more. And this form of questioning and wanting to get to the bottom of things, that really shows in his primary method. So his Socratic discourses, because he is famous for basically just going everywhere, like going to random places in public and talking to people and questioning them until they realized that they were wrong, or by questioning them, showing them where their knowledge was incomplete, or this like method of talking to people and gaining knowledge through that. Yeah,
it's pretty interesting.
A part of why he was executed as well is, I think, his romantic or sexual relationships to younger boys. And it's not that in Greek culture, it wasn't really the problem. I think wasn't even that he was maybe homosexual or like engaging like in homosexual activity, but that he was kind of drawing these young people into his philosophy, or that he was kind of convincing them of new ideas, or ideas that the city-state, Athens, didn't approve of.
So on to Plato. He lived from 428 BC to 348 BC. And as I've mentioned, he's Socrates' disciple, and he wrote in dialogues, and one of his famous writings is called Plato's Republic. And some of his most famous, I guess, ones like stories are from that, and including like the cave allegory and the myth of R. So I'll talk about the myth of R quickly. And this is like linked to his ideas on the afterlife, because the myth of R tells how a soldier who died and went to the underworld, or like the world of the afterlife, and he didn't completely die there, because he was given the role to observe what was happening in this world and to come back to life and like to report it to others. And what he saw was people entering from heaven and then people entering into hell. And like he heard how they described heaven and hell. Like heaven was like this wonderful place and it was the best thing ever, whereas hell was like tons of torture. And basically this myth just shows like these ideas of heaven and hell. And on the other hand, there's the cave allegory, which is really famous. The story starts with like how there's like three prisoners, and they've sort of always lived in a cave, strapped in this cave, and all they see are the shadows of the people and like of the life that's happening outside of the cave. But because that's all they've ever seen, they think that that's the entire world out there, that like the shadows are their reality for them. And one day, one prisoner is let out, and he sees that there is an actual entirely whole new world out there. This sort of links to Plato's essential idea of the forms and the world of the forms, and how in the cave allegory, like the sun sort of represents the highest form.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. I haven't heard about the myth of for the idea of forms. I mean, you said before when we were talking about the painting that Plato's pictured as like painting above, pointing above and like looking up. And I think that really like shows how Plato approaches his thinking or his philosophy, because he's a very like otherworldly philosopher. So he kind of tries to see what's not there or how things maybe should be. And his idea of forms is that in like another world or like outside of this world, there are forms of things like in their perfect form. So for example, there's the perfect, I don't know, like mind or something, and we we don't know these perfect or ideal forms, of course, but we have like lesser forms or lesser versions of them. So our mind, for example, is a lesser version of the ideal, like, you know, mind or something.
And this is like for everything in the world, right? like
yeah, exactly.
For example, like a chair, like when we think of a chair, we usually like think of four legs and like maybe a backrest and like armrest, or I don't know, but all of these like characteristics, like in this Plato's world of the forms, is like a perfect form of this chair. This sort of links to his ideas as a dualist as well.
A dualist believes that the mind and body are distinct and separate entities.
Plato thinks that we are, when we're born, we're sorry, like how our minds or souls have always like, they live in the world of the forms, and every time we're born, when we're given this like new body or whatever, because through birth of this, like, because the birth is so painful and like horrible, that we forget like all our knowledge of the world of the forms, of the perfect forms. And actually through life, as we gain knowledge of our world, like how things work around us, that's actually us just remembering what we saw in the world of the forms. Actually,
that's kind of like a cool idea, actually. One thing that I also find very interesting about Plato, and I think I already mentioned this to you, is like his idea of the ideal state, for example. Because he doesn't like democracy, right? So he thinks that the perfect form of ruling would be if the philosophers or like the wisest people would rule. And he actually like really like fleshes out this idea of like what the perfect state would look like. And I'm not like gonna go too deep into this, but basically the rulers, who are the philosophers, they live like separate from the normal people, or like just the citizens, and there's like a whole concept built around them for them to be able to rule wisely. For example, to protect them against like corruption. They almost live like in a very almost communist way. You know, obviously like communism wasn't a thing back then, but they don't get to own property, or like they can't own anything, not even, they don't have like their own wives, they have to share their children and everything. So and all that to prevent them from becoming corrupt or like attracted to other things than the best interest of the people. And it's also been misused, I think, in like politics, in modern politics.
Yeah.
But let me ask you a question. I mean, why Plato writes in dialogues is that he thinks that dialogue or talking to people is the best way of doing philosophy. So do you think that's true?
Yeah, I think obviously in philosophy, discussion and debate is a huge, huge thing. But often like writing helps you like consolidate your thoughts better. But like I think discussion as a first stage and to like stimulate more ideas, I think that's really important. Yeah.
Okay, but you think that in writing we can come to like a clearer conclusion?
Yeah, because in speaking, sometimes if we were to write what I maybe said, like the same meaning maybe wouldn't have conveyed because like through my tones or like body language, maybe more is conveyed. But like I think it's art, almost like a art or like a skill to like convey your message through writing. I think that's harder, but also like it's really important to do.
Yeah.
Also like to just like share this knowledge for like future generations.
Yeah, I think you're right. I'm not sure like what I think myself, but both sides, like both writing and like speaking have advantages, but I don't know. I think there's something about like speaking to people or like being in dialogue with people. I don't know, that's very special because you, as you said, you get new ideas or and maybe in a Socratic discourse you realize what's wrong about your own ideas.
No, definitely it's like I think both are important, but like in terms of like storing knowledge or like storing information, because like in the old days,
once upon a time,
I guess they had like oral tradition and like things would be passed down like through like saying, and often like a lot of information isn't passed down or is passed down like, inaccurately. So I think writing like in addition would definitely make things more.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Okay, let's talk about Aristotle now. So Aristotle's from 384 BCE to 322, and he's Plato's disciple. And as we've mentioned from the painting The School of Athens, he's an empiricist, and that means that he sort of values like empirical evidence, which you get from observing the world around you. Like you can see that the grass is green and
exactly. And I don't know if you noticed, but that's like kind of the opposite that Plato's doing. So again, in the painting, Aristotle, he is doing the opposite that Plato's doing, right? So he's focusing on, the world that we can see, or yeah, kind of like our level, let's say the ground. Because he thinks that it doesn't make sense to theorize about, ideas that we have no way of proving or something. Focus on reality, and he thinks that we should understand the workings that we can actually see and like determine.
Yeah, Aristotle's like one of his like main teachings, or I guess, is like his ideas on the four causes, and he categorizes them into like material, efficient, formal, and final. So material is what something is made out of. For example, a candle is made out of wax. And efficient is who made it, sort of like what process was like used to make it. For example, like a blacksmith made a knife. And the formal cause is the shape and form of the object, like a cup is like round or whatever. And the final cause is linked to his idea on the importance of like telos, the end or purpose. And a candle, maybe its final cause is to like shine light. And there's been like arguments on like what happens if the final cause has like there's like different final causes. For example, like a knife could be used to like chop vegetables, but it can also be used as a murder weapon. And also just Aristotle's sort of like idea of God, he terms it as the prime mover. So he says like everything is moved by another, and like the prime mover is like the start of it all.
Wait, isn't that Aquinas?
Aquinas actually is like very much influenced by Aristotle. Like I was gonna say this anyway, like Aquinas is natural law, and Aquinas just like all of his ideas are very much like stemmed from like influenced by Aristotle's ideas. And Aquinas, one of his like ethical theories that he said was like the natural law. Like what he gained from Aristotle is that like knowledge is not innate, but is gained from the reports of the senses, and empiricism, and from logical inference from self-evident truths. So this is linked to natural law. What was just by nature was not always the same as what was just by law.
I mean, Aristotle also is known as like, I think, the founder of formal logic. Something that he created and that's still very meaningful today is the syllogism. So a kind of argument where when two premises logically force the conclusion. So basically, like, there's no way that the two premises are true without the conclusion being true. So like an example is all humans are mortal, and that's like the first premise. Then the second premise, like, I'm a human, and then as a conclusion, like, I'm mortal. So there's no way that I'm a human, like that both premises are true, that I'm a human and that all humans are mortal, without the conclusion being true, that I'm mortal as well. And yeah, I think that's the kind of like logic that Aquinas uses. But
I think it's also used as like a criticism almost. It seems like logically correct to say, like, for example, like Santa's all men. No, wait, men exist. First premise. Mm-hmm. Second premise, Santa is a man, and third premise, Santa must exist. So like logically, exactly. It seems to follow through, but
Yeah.
The conclusion
I mean, yeah, exactly. That's like kind of one of the problems that comes up many times in philosophy.
So in conclusion,
I think it's extremely impressive, how far these really important ideas reach, and how, especially like how much influence these people had. I mean,
yeah,
we still talk about them today, and it's more than 2,000 years ago that they lived. So. And of course, we weren't able to cover that much ground, but I mean, in everything, in like the foundations of democratic thought, even, I think there is still a lot that relies on this notion of, finding things out yourself, or like questioning and like finding out the truth and everything. Even though Plato and Socrates were so anti-democratic, I still think that's like very deep-rooted in our culture.
Mm-hmm. I think a lot of these topics we can make further episodes on, like smaller topics that we've mentioned today.
So again, thank you guys so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed it. Bye.
Thank you for coming to our lesson.
We hope to see you again next week.